The 2021-22 basketball season is upon us. We are focusing on new rules and points of emphasis. One of the points of emphasis this year is traveling. We're going to be focusing on all of the case play regarding traveling today. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Basketball Rules Expert, the show where we take National Federation of High School basketball rules and lift them off the printed page. We breathe life into them, simplify, clarify, amplify, and give them to you so you can take them with you onto the basketball court where it is most important. Greetings again, everybody. My name is Greg Austin with abetterofficial.com. I've been a high school basketball official here in the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area for over a decade. I consider myself to be a basketball rules expert. This show is all about helping you on a journey to becoming a basketball rules expert as well. Before we get started, allow me a moment to thank our phenomenal show supporters, Gerald Mazzucci, Les O'Connor Jr., Jason Hayes, Sylvia Biggett, and Scott Calvin. Much appreciated and much love. You want to support the show? There'll be a link in the show notes below. Right, so traveling. Traveling is one of the points of emphasis this year. As we prepare for the basketball season, we want to spend time in the rules book. We want to spend time in the case book. Now we can do both. Let's look at case plays today regarding traveling from the case book for National Federation of High School basketball rules. That's what we're doing today. Let's look at our very first case play. A1 attempts to catch the ball while running rapidly. A1 muffs the ball, but succeeds in securing it before it strikes the floor. A1 then begins a dribble, taking several steps between the time the ball was first touched until it was caught. We see this play happen a lot. Now, obviously, something funny has happened on the play. Players running, they attempt to catch the ball, they muff the ball. Meaning they never control the ball, right? Maybe they're like fumbling it in the air like this. What's the energy in the building immediately from their opponents? Everybody, come on, rep, right? That's the energy. But we have to understand when we see plays on the basketball court, when we see plays, we see all sorts of things, a full spectrum of things. Some things are unusual, funny looking, etc. But what we have to focus on is what is illegal. If we know what is illegal, then all of the myriad things, hundreds, dozens, crazy stuff that we see on the court, well, I recognize that that's unusual. I recognize it's funny looking, all of these things, but where's the illegal? My illegal alarm is not going off on this play. Why not, right? So let's take a look at the play, at the ruling on the play. Pretty straightforward. There's been no violation, provided that A1, after the catching the ball, released the ball to start the dribble before the pivot foot was lifted from the floor. Right? We see, and you will see this in your game. You are a brand new basketball official, and you understand this rule. You will see this in your game. It occurs in your game, and suddenly there's a whistle coming from your partner, right? Many officials just react to looks funny, right? They maybe didn't get a look at the pivot foot. They didn't get a look at this or whatever, but they know that something funny happened, and I'll have a reaction whistle on a play and say, that's trouble, right? You can expect that, I guarantee it. Unfortunately. So on this play, the player muffs the ball. In order to travel in this situation, we have to be holding the ball. That's our first cue. If we are not holding the ball, we cannot travel. It's as simple as that, right? So if we have no control, no holding of the ball, this player cannot travel. Now, a player running rapidly, at some point, this player catches the ball. We have to recognize whether or not they release the dribble prior to the pivot foot being lifted from the floor. That's our restriction. On a dribbler, you must release the ball before the pivot foot is lifted, right? That's the restriction on a dribbler. So a relatively simple, straightforward case play that brings to bear really fundamental concepts of how we want to officiate the game of high school basketball. All right, let's take a look at another case play regarding traveling. A1 attempts a try after ending the dribble. The try does not touch the backboard, the ring, or any other player. A1 runs and is able to catch the ball before it strikes the floor. Is this traveling? Another play that we see all the time, right? And energy in the building again rises. Opponents, they know this is unusual, and something in their mind says, I know this is a travel, right? We always have to recognize that at other levels, rules are different. At the NBA level, this is illegal. I believe at all other levels it's not, but in high school basketball, if a player releases a try, team control has ended. We know we can take that on the court with us whenever we enter the court. Team control ends on the release of a try. So if we judge this to be a try, there is no longer team control. This player cannot travel by rule. They run in, it's an air ball, they are the first to get to the ball, they grab it, and maybe they go up and score, right? Simple and straightforward. Again, we expect energy to come in. People saying, come on, Rev. How can you miss that? It's right in front of you, right? From our rules knowledgeable coaches and spectators. But of course, this is legal by rule. Let's take a look at the actual ruling on the play. No, when A1 recovered his or her own try, A1 could either dribble, pass, or try again, or call a timeout. There was no team control after the ball was released on a try. Something we like to do when we look at these case play scenarios is get to the essential components, right? And in this case, team control ending on a try, so that we need those fundamentals. If we have those fundamentals with us onto the basketball court, then we are in a much stronger position to adjudicate plays. So that's our key takeaway on this play. Let's take a look now at our next traveling case play. Dribbler A1 catches the ball with the right foot touching the floor and then jumps off that foot and alights on both feet simultaneously. A, with feet parallel, or B, with one foot in advance. Right? Sometimes we get case plays or rules questions, and they throw a variable in here about the positioning of the feet, which can be distracting from the essential component of the rule. Dribbler A1 catches the ball with one foot touching the floor, jumps, and simultaneously lands with 2 feet. Has this player traveled? Does it make a difference whether it's a staggered landing or the feet are parallel? Right? These are the questions on this play. You see this scenario frequently when coaches are instructing players how to shoot, 3-point shots, let's say, catch and shoot, right? They teach them to catch jumping off the 1 foot and landing on 2 feet. It's a rhythm mechanism that they have in their game. If we look at the rule scenario that's presented here, and we look at the ruling, the position of the feet has no significance, but they must come to the floor simultaneously in both A and B. In either case, it is a violation if the player subsequently pivots on either foot, right? So that's a key restriction that we need to know. But whenever we're taking, just a hint, when we're taking rules, tests, and quizzes, sometimes there's red herrings dropped in. In this case, the positioning of the feet is the red herring. The essential component here is a player is allowed to legally, holding the ball, jump off 1, land on 2, but in that instance, neither foot can be the pivot foot by rule. So a good case play to look at to help reinforce our understanding of the rules. All right, let's move on. Next case play, please. Airborne A1 and A2 jointly grab the rebound and each alights simultaneously on both feet. A1 and A2 each move 1 foot in attempting to wrestle the ball from each other before realizing they are teammates. A1 lets go and A2 dribbles away. First of all, let's check the language of this. Airborne A1 and A2 jointly grab the rebound and each alights simultaneously on both feet. Is that poetry or is that poetry? That's fantastic. I love that. Right, so in this situation, we have 2 teammates both holding the basketball simultaneously, landing, and then having some footwork activity. And the question, I guess, here is essentially, is the combination of their footwork. Since each player moved one of their feet, does that constitute a traveling violation by rule? And indeed, of course, the ruling on the play is very straightforward. Legal. There has been no violation as neither A1 or A2 moved their pivot foot while they were in joint control. That's interesting, the language there, joint control. I don't know if we're going to find that anywhere else. Mutual control. They were both holding the basketball. And so if one player who was holding the basketball had illegal footwork in this instance, instead of each player moving 1 foot, let's say one of the players holding the ball moved both feet, has a violation occurred in that instance? And I would say yes. Yes, it has. But that's going to be a tough one to process in the moment. Hey, can I ask you a quick favor? If you're finding this video content valuable, take just a second. Hit the like button below. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and helps to get the video in front of more basketball officials so that we can all get better together. Let's look at another case play regarding traveling. A1 jumps to try for goal. B1 also jumps and A slaps the ball out of A1's hands. B touches the ball but does not prevent A1 from releasing the ball. C touches the ball and A1 returns to the floor holding the ball. Or D touches the ball and A1 drops it to the floor and touches it first after it bounces. Well, this is a good play scenario, and it's one that we consistently see officiated erratically. Let's just put it that way. How officials handle this possible held ball situation where a defender contacts the ball and dislodges it, a defender touches the ball but doesn't prevent its release, a defender touches the ball and does prevent its release, or the after touching of the ball, the a player who had left the floor in an attempt to try releases the ball and is the first to pick it up. So let's look at all of the scenarios here so we can have a better understanding of the rule, right? So if we have a situation where a player, a defensive player, prevents the release of a player holding the ball, prevents the release on either a try or a pass, and when we say prevents a release, it refers specifically to an airborne player. Another factor we see on similar plays. We'll talk about dribblers in this situation subsequently, but in this play, a player alights. They leave the the opposite of alight. They leave the floor in an attempt. The ball is dislodged by the defender. We cannot have a held ball in that situation by rule. We cannot. There has been no prevention of release. There has been a dislodging of the basketball. If the defensive player touches the ball, and sometimes we see an offensive player then react to the touch negatively and then come back to the floor and commit a traveling violation. If the touch does not prevent the release, then we are not going to a held ball situation. If the touch prevents the release, the player tried, but the ball was held, they subsequently come to the floor with the ball, this is a held ball situation by rule. If we had a situation where the defender, the offensive player, reacts to the touch, as in D, by holding the basketball and then releasing it, right? The defender did not dislodge the ball in D. In D, the defender doesn't dislodge the ball, but the offensive player says, oh my gosh, my shot is kind of ruined. I'm going to drop the ball and then pick it back up. What has occurred in that situation? So this is a great play scenario. Let's look at all of the possibilities here in the ruling. In A and in B, the ball remains live. No violation, no held ball situation. In C, we have a traveling violation. And in D, a violation for starting a dribble with the pivot foot off the floor, since the touching did not prevent the pass or try. So when the ball is dislodged by rule, that is nothing. When in B, when there's touching of the ball but doesn't prevent the release, there is nothing. In C, we don't have a prevention of the release. There's just a touching of the ball. The player comes back to the floor. That's a traveling violation. And in D, since the player left the floor to shoot and ultimately releases the ball and then touches it again, that is an illegal dribble by rule. Woo! Let's take a look at our next traveling case play. A1 receives a pass and establishes the right foot as the pivot. While faking a pass or try, A1 lifts the pivot foot and stands on the left foot alone while undecided as to what to do. Has A1 traveled? Again, this is a play we see all the time mishandled by the officials, right? Whenever there's a point of emphasis regarding traveling, the key component in addressing traveling is obviously understanding the rules, but finding the pivot foot and knowing the rules about if a pivot foot is lifted, what can or cannot happen legally by rule. In this instance, this is going to look extremely awkward on the play. The player who's holding the ball is going to, potentially have a look of, oh God, I screwed up, right? Because they're in this undecided action. But understanding that a pivot foot may legally be lifted. Legally be lifted. The penalty, the violation comes when the pivot foot is returned to the floor. So in the absence of a returning of the pivot foot to the floor, we have no violation. We have an extremely awkward play, and we have a play that everybody in the gym knows, oh, that's traveling. Yeah, that's traveling, right? So we're going to have to stand strong again. And what are we going to say to that coach? Coach, that's legal by rule. Never return, so what can we say? Never return the pivot foot to the floor. I know it looked funny, coach. That is legal by rule. And the player almost always thinks they violated. And so sometimes they'll just stop playing basketball. But in this instance, so again, we want to know what could that player legally do by rule. When they are in that awkward flamingo position, they can pass, shoot, or request a timeout. All legal by rule. Let's take a look at the ruling on the play. We know what it is. No. Traveling would occur if A1 begins a dribble or returns the pivot foot to the floor. While in this position, A1 pass, try for goal, or request a timeout. Ooh, I think I said that. It's always great when the actual ruling on the play matches up with what I say. Because it is a play that in these troubled times, when we have so much division in the country, this play brings everybody together. Everybody in the gym except the officials know that this is a violation by rule. So we've done our part in uniting the country. But of course, everybody's wrong. So we're talking about our flamingo play. If that player had lifted their pivot foot, they're up in that undecided position, they can pass, they can shoot, they can request a timeout. They cannot dribble because you cannot release a dribble after the pivot foot has been lifted. Let's move along and look at another case play regarding traveling. A1 tosses the ball from one hand to the other while keeping his or her pivot foot in contact with the floor, or in B, A1 throws the ball over the head of B1, then takes several steps before catching it. So two scenarios. One, a player is standing, holding the ball, pivot foot in place, moving the ball from hand to hand, right? Is this legal? Does it raise any doubt, right? Wait, can you do that? Again, it's a reflection of, okay, I'm seeing something, it's unusual, I don't usually see that. It may raise doubt. Is there a violation on this play, right? If we know what is illegal, we know that none of this activity falls into the category of illegal, so we know that's a legal play by rule. Now, in our second scenario, we've got a player who's holding the ball, maybe a defender's in front of them. They throw the ball over the head of the defender. They run around the defender and catch the basketball and do something, either start a dribble, release a try for goal, etc. Is that action legal? We don't see that every day, right? So, all right, let's look at the ruling on the play. Legal in A, but a traveling violation in B. Since the ball did not touch the floor, the tossing and subsequent catch is illegal, right? If we think this through, if this was a legal play, a player could do this all over the court, just throw the ball up in the air, run to a different spot, etc., right? Illegal by rule, not something you see every day. Let's take a look at another traveling case play. Is it traveling if A1 falls to the floor, A, while holding the ball, or B, after being airborne to catch a pass or control a rebound, right? This is a really good play for us to understand. What is the traveling restriction that's going to come into play on this case play, right? when a player is holding the basketball, what parts of their body may legally touch the floor? That's the key. If we understand that, if we own that, if we know that a player holding the ball can touch the floor with their feet, a player who is holding the ball while standing can touch the floor with their feet, they can touch the floor with their hands. So let's say a player loses their balance, puts a hand down on the floor, gains their balance, and stands up. Is that legal by placing a hand on the floor? That is legal by rule. Obviously, feet on the floor, legal by rule. Any other body part, illegal for them to be holding the ball and then touch that part, a knee, the rear end, an elbow, an arm, etc. Illegal by rule. So in A, while holding the ball, they fall to the floor while holding the ball. I would assume this means after they were standing holding the ball. Or B, after being airborne to catch a pass or control a rebound, right? So we see this play occur. Player goes up for a rebound in contested situation. They grab the ball and they end up falling to the floor. Has a violation occurred? Or a player makes a phenomenal defensive effort, dives, intercepts the ball, and falls to the floor holding the basketball. Has a violation occurred in this instance? Let's look at the ruling on the play. Yes, in A and in B, right? And this, when it comes to a situation where a player has made a phenomenal athletic play, it's almost painful to have to put a violation on the play, but it is illegal for a player to, even if they catch the ball midair, to then land with anything contacting the floor other than their hands and their feet. So that player who makes that rebound situation or intercepts a pass and goes to the floor holding the ball, that's the key, holding the basketball, that violation has occurred. If they were not holding the ball, let's say the ball was loose, right? So the player, let's say we have a rebound situation, and when we look at plays on Friday, maybe we could look at a couple of situations. A player grabs the ball on a rebounding situation, is losing their balance, and they contact the floor. But on their way to the floor, the ball became loose. And then they land on the floor and then regain control of the basketball. Has a violation occurred in this instance? No, because the player was not holding the ball when something other than their hands or feet contacted the floor. Right? If we take that hands and feet holding the ball restriction with us onto the court, then we can know whether or not something illegal has occurred. Because when that player goes to the floor in that situation, again, what do we expect? The building, the opponents, the fans? Travel, you can't be on the floor holding the ball. What are you looking at, ref? Come on now. It's right in front of you. So understanding the rules and restrictions in this instance really help us through. It is tough to have to penalize a player who's made a super athletic play and violated as a result. The rules bind our hands in that instance, but if we know what the rules and restrictions are, we're in better position to get the call correct. Let's see what's in store in our next case play. A1 dives for a loose ball and slides after gaining control. A1 is in a position either on his or her back or stomach. What can A1 do without violating? Ball's loose on the floor. Kid makes a hustle play, grabs the ball, slides on the floor. Their perspiration providing lubrication. They slide on the floor. In the end, they stop. They are holding the basketball either face down or face up. What is this player allowed to do by rule? First of all, we know that any player holding the ball has player control. That player can request a timeout, that player can pass the basketball. That player can, in this case, make a try for goal. And in this case, that player could initiate a dribble, assuming that they did not have, this was not part of, let's say, an interrupted dribble where the ball went off their foot and then they dove for it, hold the ball, etc. So we know all those things. But let's say we have a player who is face down holding the basketball. They can do all of those things, but what they are restricted from doing is attempting to get up by rule. That's key language, attempting to get up. Now, a player who lands on their back in this situation is allowed by rule to sit up and do all of the things. So that's our ruling on this play. Let's take a look and see. A1 may pass, shoot, start a dribble, or request a timeout. Once A1 has the ball and is no longer sliding, he or she may not roll over. That's really key language. After they are no longer sliding, he or she may not roll over. If they're flat on their back, A1 may sit up without violating. Any attempt to get to the feet is traveling unless A1 is dribbling. It is also traveling if A1 puts the ball on the floor, then rises and is first to touch the ball. Okay, so this is really important language, this case play. It is illegal for a player to attempt to get up. That's the rule when they are on the floor holding the ball. But let's look at this language. First of all, there's two things. Can a player slide and roll simultaneously? And then stop. Once A1 has the ball and is no longer sliding, he or she may not roll over. Right? There's a case there that player can slide and roll, but once they stop, then the restrictions come in. And if they're flat on their back, they may sit up without violating. That's a simple fundamental tenet. Player on the floor holding the ball may sit up. Any attempt to get to the feet is traveling, right? In the rule itself, there's get up. It doesn't specify what attempt to get up means, but here, any attempt to get to the feet is traveling, right? Unless A1 is dribbling, it is also traveling if A1 puts the ball on the floor, then stands up and is the first to touch the ball. So that's a pretty unique scenario there as well. So plays when players are on the floor create inconsistency the way the officials handle it. Some officials, if a player oscillates at all, right, the player's not allowed to roll over. What's the definition of roll over? There is none, right? Becomes a judgment call. Has the player rolled over? Like if I'm training my dog and they roll on their side when I say roll over, do they get the treat? No, they haven't rolled over. So we can have inconsistency in this area. We can have disagreement. It's illegal for a player to roll over. What rolling over means is something to be hashed out. Sometimes you see kids on the floor do really incredible and athletic things. First of all, the ability for high school athletes to get from the floor to a standing position sometimes is, you have to marvel at their athleticism, their ability to do so. Also, imagine this scenario where there's a competitive situation and players are on the floor. What's the first reaction of the officials is to come in and get closer. And so when we do, we're looking down into the well at our players on the floor, and sometimes they can get out of the situation by beginning a dribble or what have you. And our ability to make judgments about the legality of their movements is affected by the fact that we are in such close proximity. Ends up sliding on their knees, controlling the ball. So they're in a kneeling position. What are they allowed to do by rule? Obviously, they are allowed to request a timeout, pass, shoot, or begin a dribble. In this instance, they would not be allowed to place the ball on the floor, stand up, and be the first to touch the ball. They would not be allowed to stand up, obviously. They would not be allowed to attempt to get to the feet, right? Key question would be, well, what if they just lift one foot so that it's on the floor and one knee stays in place, and then they make a pass? They wanted to get better balance. This play actually happened in a JV tournament game, one of my first games I ever officiated in high school. This play happened. It was like whirring. It was whirring. The old cranium trying to analyze what happened on that play. How about one final traveling case play? Let's take a look. A1 secures possession of the ball with one knee in contact with the floor. May A1 assume a standing position without committing a traveling violation? Oh, I thought we were going to get to a better scenario than that. A1 secures possession and they have one knee in contact with the floor. First of all, is that legal? Right, they have something other than their hands and feet contacting the floor, right? A player can be in any position and gain control of the ball. They can be on their backside, sitting up. They can be lying on the floor. They can be face down in a push-up position. They can be in any possible configuration on the court, and then they hold the ball. Once they're holding the ball, then the restriction of only hands and feet comes into play. So this player is legal when they secure the possession. Let's take a look at the ruling on the play. It depends on what A1 does. If A1 attempts to stand up while holding the ball, a traveling violation occurs. However, if A1 starts a dribble and then rises, no violation has occurred. Also, A1 could pass, try for goal, or request a timeout from that position. Again, what I would say here is we have in the rule a player may not get up. And some officials say get up means any upward motion, right? But in this instance where we have a player on the floor, it says attempt to stand up, right? So I'm just going to say, use that to your best ability going forward. So that's a really simple case play. So what have we done today? What have we done? We have looked at all of the case plays in the case book regarding traveling, and they cover the fundamentals. They cover, though, things that occur in our game that produce energy. We see things that's unusual, right? We may see these things in our game, but they're relatively unusual. They're out of the ordinary, and they produce an immediate reaction from fans, stakeholders in the game. But what we want as basketball officials is not to have an immediate reaction until we know that a violation has occurred. Unusual things can unfold in front of us, but if we know what is a violation and what is not, then we can be prevented from putting a reaction whistle on a play that was actually legal. So when NFHS comes out with points of emphasis, and one of them is traveling, do they want more traveling called, less traveling called? Neither. They want more accuracy in traveling rulings. Accuracy, not putting a whistle on something that is legal and putting whistles on things that are illegal, right? The inconsistency comes when we have legal plays and a whistle is put on it, or we have an illegal play and no whistle is put on it. Making proper adjudications about traveling plays is always going to involve, first of all, understanding the rules and restrictions, which for traveling involves many different things. It's one of the harder rules to own. But in addition, The basis of traveling is so often rooted in finding the pivot foot and making that a habitual activity. When we're on the court, a player has the ball, knowing which of their feet is the pivot foot, if there is one, and having that be a fundamental concept that we always take with us onto the basketball court so that we can adjudicate plays properly. If you find content like this valuable as a basketball official, take a moment to do all the things. Hit the like button below. Also, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever we produce brand new content for you. Allow me a moment to thank our fantastic channel and show supporters. Gerald Mazzucci, Les O'Connor Jr., Jason Hayes, Sylvia Biggett, and Scott Calvin. Much appreciated and much love. You want to support the show, you can always buy us coffee. There'll be a link above. There'll be a link above and in the show notes below. We have additional video content available for you here. I've made this selection. YouTube has made this selection. Make your choice. Choose wisely. We'll see you in the very next video.